We now introduce our first speaker, Tony Dahlman. Please come up. His title is The Last Battle of the Cold War. The Last Battle of the Cold War. Tony Dahlman.
After World War II, the greatest conflict of the 20th century was between the capitalist United States and the communist Soviet Union. But it was called a Cold War because there was never any direct conflict between the two superpowers. However, through proxy wars, espionage, and a space race, and enough nuclear weapons to blow up the entire world the entire time over, the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union stayed in the news for decades. But Mr. Toastmaster of the day, fellow Toastmasters, and honored guests, today I am here to tell you the story of the last great battle of the Cold War. However, this battle did not take place in Vietnam or Cuba. It did not take place with Soviet spies or American lunar modules, and it certainly did not take place with nuclear weapons. This battle took place in the only appropriate place that you can have a battle for a Cold War, on a sheet of ice in Lake Placid, New York. In 1979, the United States was in a little bit of a slump. President Jimmy Carter talked about a crisis of confidence in the United States. Inflation was going rampant, interest rates were high. Poll results had come back that for the first time, Americans believed that the United States would be worse off in 5 years instead of better off. The United States needed something to pick them up. On the other hand, the Soviet Union had assembled the greatest hockey team in the world. They were able to take some of the best players in their country and take a team that would beat all-star teams in Europe and the United States. But probably the greatest factor of their team was they had the best goalie in the world. Vladislav Treshnev was easily considered one of the best goalies the world had ever seen. In a Challenge Cup that took place in 1979 between the Soviet team and a group of NHL All-Stars, the Soviet team thrashed the NHL All-Stars 6-0 in New York. It was easily believed that they were the best hockey team in the world. Unfortunately, the Americans were not as well off. The Americans were not able to send their best hockey players to the Olympics because most of them were professionals in the NHL. So Herb Brooks, just off of his third national championship at the University of Minnesota, assembled a group of hockey players, mostly from the University of Minnesota, a perennial powerhouse in the Midwest, and Boston University, a perennial hockey power from the East Coast. And he promised that he was going to develop an entire new brand of hockey with wide open play and physical contact. And he also believed that the secret to beating the Soviets was to improve the conditioning of the American teams. For you would need to be able to play for an entire 60 minutes in order to beat the Soviet hockey team. Brooks put his team through an excruciating training camp and put them on an exhibition tour across Europe and across North America. He put his team through 51 exhibition games over a period of 5 months, which included some good wins, even over some NHL teams in the United States. But after one embarrassing tie to the Norwegian national team, he told his team, if you're not going to skate during the game, you're going to skate after the game. And he put them through a skating drill, which was known as the Herbies. In a Herbie, you start at the end line, go to the blue line and back, go from the end line to the red line and back, go from the end line to the opposite blue line and back, and then go from the end line to the opposite end line and back. And he forced his team to skate this over and over again. They continued to skate while all of the spectators left. They continued to skate while the custodian shut the lights off in the arena. They continued to skate for an entire hour. The next day, when the United States played Norway again, they defeated Norway 9-0. Brooks was going to expect nothing less than 100% from his hockey players. The United States had one more exhibition game 1 week before the Olympics. He was scheduled to play the Soviet Union at Madison Square Garden, New York. But the Soviets came out and proved their dominance, beating the United States 9-3. Everybody in the arena clearly knew that the Soviet Union was the best hockey team in the world. However, Brooks was able to regroup his team and able to come to the Olympics. In their first game against heavily favored Sweden, the United States was able to come from behind and skate to a 2-2 tie. And they were able to follow this up by beating silver medal favorite Czechoslovakia 7-3. After victories against Romania, Norway, and West Germany, they were able to skate into the medal round of the 1980 Winter Olympics. But who were they scheduled to play? That's right, the Soviet Union. On February 22nd, 1980, everybody expected the Soviet Union to win this game handily. It wasn't even being broadcast live in the United States because everybody expected the Soviet Union to be winning by so much. And as was typical for the American team during that tournament, they started off behind. They quickly fell down to a 2-1 lead. But near the end of the first period, the United States hit a desperation slap shot towards the goal. But Treshiev misplayed the rebound, causing the puck to bounce 20 feet in front of the goal. Mark Magic Johnson, sprinting from the box after a shift change, split the Soviet defensemen and scored the tying goal with 1 second left in the period. There was life left in the Americans yet. Soviet head coach was so angry at his goalie that he pulled the goalie for the backup after the first period. When asked about this later, the Soviet coach said that this was the dumbest decision that he had ever made as a hockey coach. The Soviets were able to regroup during the second period, regaining their offensive firepower, but they were only able to score 1 goal, heading into the third period, up 3-2. However, the American conditioning proved to pay off, and 9 minutes into the period, Mark Johnson scored his second goal of the night, slipping a power play goal underneath the diving Vladimir Mishkov, the backup goalie for the Soviets. And a minute later, American captain Mike Eruzione threw a slap shot into the back of the Soviet net, putting the Americans up 4-3. The Soviets had never been behind for the entire Olympic period and started to get desperate, continually attacking the American goaltender. But American goaltender Jim Craig proved to be the MVP of the night, continually turning away all the Soviet shots. The Soviets outshot the Americans 36-19, but Jim Craig was able to keep his Americans in the game. As time started to wind down, the American crowd started to get frantic. They knew that they were witnessing a great American moment. Television announcer Al Michaels, who was televising the game for the tape-delayed audience, gave what was probably one of the most famous calls in sports history. The crowd was counting down, 5 seconds left to play. Do you believe in miracles? Yes. The Americans won 4-3. What most people don't remember is that the Americans did not secure a gold medal that day. That occurred 2 days later after the Americans defeated Finland 4-2. But the United States won the 1980 Winter Olympics gold medal and was able and would forever be known as the Miracle on Ice. Things definitely improved for the Americans over the next few years. Within a decade, the Berlin would fall and the Soviet Union would collapse. And the American 1980 Winter Olympics ice hockey team would go down into history. Mr. Toastmaster of the day.